Greetings, everyone. I am Jake, and this is Underground Book Club, where we are discussing, general topics, really.
Well, here's what happened.
Yeah?
This morning, as we were having breakfast, it occurred to us that in September and October, we're going to be very busy with our Halloween stuff. And so we said, well, maybe we should record a couple of extra episodes.
We're pretty busy around Halloween season. Did we want to mention why we're busy?
We go to work at an amusement park, and we work in haunted houses.
Oh, it's great. It's great fun.
It is so much fun.
I hope this year is even better than the last. It'll be great.
You want to talk about truth being stranger than fiction? Just
God,
go work
seriously.
in a haunted house for a while.
Hell, working around young people and people who love horror, you'll find some really intriguing folks.
It's
You remember when we went on tours of haunted houses? The kind of people we met who also were ghost hunting?
my God, yes, it was wonderful.
Great people.
We like to people watch.
So, because we're busy, we would not have time to record and write episodes and such. So we've decided to, ahead of time, record some episodes that just talk about general writing topics. These topics are in no particular order. Maybe I'll even do something pretty professional and I'll actually list out the timestamps for what our topics actually are. That is some professional YouTube stuff right there.
Oh my God, it's a little too professional.
For the likes of you?
Overwhelmed by the professionalism.
Oh, did you introduce yourself, by the way? Did you say I'm Chris?
No, I didn't.
Just, okay, this is for the edit.
And I'm Chris.
Now less comical.
And I'm Chris.
Okay, now, like you're sad.
And I'm Chris. I'm sorry.
Now, like you're a character from Bloodless.
I'm Chris? I forgot that I was Chris. What's going on here?
Basically, I wrote down here, using Google Docs and the library. So, of course, that's almost kind of a cliche. It's like, if you want to get into writing, use the library. I don't mean for checking out books, although there are lots of helpful books at the library, I will say.
It's almost their only purpose.
Almost. But, you know what? The library has computers. You can log onto a computer and boom, there you've got free internet. And using the free...
So, you're talking for people who maybe don't have their own computer.
It'd be weird if they were listening to our show and they didn't have a computer.
But it's possible.
Okay, it's possible, sure, they might be listening to it on our phone. I'm saying for people who get on their computer and they can't write because they're really distracted.
So you're talking about having a space
where
you are forced to write.
Libraries are quiet places where you feel like you're in class almost. You sit there and you're like, oh, I have no choice but to write.
Well, and you're surrounded by books.
Yes, you are.
I mean, that would add to the mood, I would think.
It's even less of a mood thing. It's more like, I'm in a library, I can't really play any video games or anything. I'm going to, this is a place where I can actually sit down and write. And libraries, they've got, you're surrounded by reference materials. I think the library is a great place for you to sit down and actually focus and write without having all the distractions that you might have around your house. Without your family bugging you, without your pets bugging you. And also I recommend taking a pair of headphones because just because libraries are supposed to be quiet places doesn't mean they always are. They can have kids running around, and in some cases I've had adults having loud conversations. I've had guys that want to talk about cat food factories, talking... Yeah, so just take... In fact, I would almost recommend not even just taking earbuds. I'd recommend taking big-ass headphones. Those tell people I can't talk to you.
Yeah, like, don't bother me.
Don't bother me, yeah. And when you get on one of these computers and you use their Word docs, you're like... Just because I'm able to go to the library and use a computer, that doesn't mean I can use the same computer every time, and I can't just work at the library and also work at home. You can! I recommend a great service called Google Docs. And of course, you might be thinking like, oh well, sure, it's just a lame word program for Google, if you have a Google account. And when you open up Google Docs, you realize, oh, so if I can literally anywhere I can access my Google account, I can open up my Google Docs. And so anywhere that you can think of, you can open up your Word
It's the
doc.
cloud, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
the cloud.
it's your stuff is being stored in the cloud.
You can open up your
It's
work.
password protected.
Yeah. Google Docs has gotten very sophisticated. It is basically got all of the main tools of Word. Hopefully you're not using that extravagant of functions in order to write down your novel.
I used to be a Word. I wrote in Word and nothing else, and Jake actually got me started on Google Docs, and I am so glad he did
Because
it's really nice. It's also very compatible with Word.
you can export it into
It's
anything.
very easy to pick your stuff up and just plop it right back into Word again.
You can export it into a PDF, into whatever kind of document you need. It's great. I'm not being paid by Google to say this. Google is too powerful to even consider a guy like me for marketing. I'm just saying it's free, it's easy, everyone's got a Google account anymore.
At any place you go that you can access a computer and a keyboard that has the internet.
You can access you can access your work. Google Docs.
Another thing that Google Docs does that is really nice, it saves your work
all the time.
Constantly. I've had times when my computer locked up and threw me out while I was writing. I got back on, and I mean, it had saved like right up to the word before when the power went off.
And speaking of words, it's got a lot of little grammar and spelling checks.
Well, it's basically just like Word.
I think it's got a more elaborate grammar check system.
Do you think so?
Yeah.
Well, now,
sometimes
I don't know about that.
But I know for a fact, like sometimes it'll underline stuff that Word doesn't catch.
Well,
it's more sophisticated. I promise. This has happened to me.
You heard it here, folks.
Google Docs.
Jake thinks Google Docs is better than Word.
But of course, I'm just saying from my experience, this is what works for me.
Google Docs is very accessible and it's free.
There's probably a dozen programs like Google Docs that store things on a cloud. But when you store things on a cloud, it's great. You can plop it in when you work on it at the library. You can plop it in when you're working at home.
It's nice too. Jake and I are working on some books together.
Yeah.
And what we've found is if we have a shared Google Docs account, we can both work on the same document. Like I close it up.
I write the main bulk of it, and then you can edit it and add stuff.
I get in and edit it and add my stuff and close it, and then he gets in.
And you can erase all the stuff. I'm kidding.
It's it's nice that we can both work on the same document.
Exactly.
Now, I'd like to touch on Jake's recommendation of the library.
Oh, yeah?
What he's saying there is that it's good to have a space where you write, and that is like your writing space. You can't be distracted by other things.
You can't get up and go watch TV.
Right. If you need that.
Yeah.
Now, not everybody can drop everything and go to the library.
Okay.
If you've got little kids, or if you're 250 miles from a library,
sure,
then you can do the same thing at home if you are able to have the willpower to be strict with yourself.
Right.
You'll never get a book written if you don't sit your ass down and write it. Anybody you talk to can say, I'm thinking about writing a book.
Sure.
Okay, but it's a completely different thing to sit your ass down and do it, and you've got to do it to ever have anybody read it.
Right.
So you can also give yourself a space at home. You can set aside a time. You can put on a little kitchen timer.
Yeah.
And it's like practicing your piano.
You know, writing for 30 minutes a day, even if you only write 2 or 3 pages, if you do that every day, you will be very surprised with how much you get done.
All right, so make yourself write, like you said, 30 minutes a day, at least. If you can't, you know what, you know your schedule and the time, but making yourself sit down and write.
Hell, there's probably some people out there that can multitask. They can write while watching TV or something.
Well, maybe so, but
maybe. I wouldn't recommend it, but maybe
I
you can
can't.
do that. Yeah.
I can't. I can't do anything else while I'm writing, and I don't want anybody flipping talking to me when I'm trying to write. And I know who you might be talking about. Yeah. Well, anyway,
okay, cool.
So, wait, there was one other thing I was going to say. Oh, yes. Yes, 30 minutes a day or whatever time you decide, even if you don't feel like it, sit down and write anyway.
Okay, sure.
If you don't have anything to write, make something up. Write some fan fiction.
Okay.
Write how much you hate this guy you work with. I don't care. You'll be amazed. If you write 30 minutes a day, you'll be amazed how much better you get at writing.
I feel like we're about to sell some self-help pamphlets or something.
And
call this toll-free number.
have you heard the good news?
Oh my gosh.
By the way, I don't know if anybody does this anymore, but you can also write a book with a pen and a pad of paper.
Wow. Man, that's going old school.
It certainly is, but I bet people do it.
If you have some blank stone rocks that you're allowed to carve stuff into, maybe? Heck, maybe even you grab a lot of people's attention. Take a picture of it. You might post that somewhere and people will be like, oh my god, he carved.
God, that's like, have you read that wall? That is, oh my god, I love that wall. That is...
Even if it's not very good, people still be like, man, he carved that into the wall. You know, that takes some effort.
He must really believe in what he carved into that wall.
Are we not making much sense? Well, I have some recommendations for helpful books that you might want to read. Because if you're a writer, you'll probably end up reading some. And I have some book recommendations that might help you get started. First one thing I wanted to mention was... it's called How to Write a Damn Good Novel by James N. Frey. It's funny, I actually got this book from my grandparents. I read it and I'm like, damn, this is some damn good advice. How to Write a Damn Good Novel by James N. Frey. And it turns out he's got a whole freaking series on this. He's got How to Write a Damn Good Novel 2, How to Write a Damn Good Mystery. He's got, okay, I think he's only got those 3. But still.
Damn.
It starts from step 1. What's your premise? What are your characters? How to start? What is your book's conflict? How do your characters stay in conflict? It talks about all this stuff from a guy who's written novels before. And you'll read it going, oh, okay, that makes sense. You'll actually start to find some terminology you didn't know of. Really great stuff on how to get started from the mind of someone who's had to do it before. And then, the second thing I wanted to bring up on that, if you want even more knowledge on how to write this Audible book that's called Writing Great Fiction, Storytelling Tips and Techniques by James Hines, I think narrated by, but I'm recommending that book because it is basically like attending a writer's class, and it's free if you get an Audible subscription, that is. It's freaking over 12 hours long. It's got tons of info on it, but by the end, you'll feel like you are at least a rookie or even amateur on writing. I don't even have a word down.
I want to... Are you sure it's free?
Okay, like, it's free in that you can get like a free month of Audible and get a credit and then download it.
And then get it. Okay, so you can finagle your way into getting it for free.
But you have to pay for it.
But Jake's not saying that it is a free book.
No, it's not a free book.
Okay. Yeah. Just wanted to make sure about that.
And by the way, and How to Write a Damn Good Novel, that's not free either. But you might be able to rent How to Write a Damn Good Novel from the library.
The library.
Oh my god, it all comes back around.
It all comes full circle.
Did you have any recommendations on books?
I don't. My recommendation for writers is to read a lot. Especially read a lot in the genre that you want to write in.
Yes, that's actually one of the tips that James N. Frey mentioned.
If you don't read, I don't know how you can write. I honestly don't. It doesn't make any sense to me if you're not an avid reader. How can you write?
Sure.
So,
but we do know of a guy who has read a ton and his work isn't great.
Oh, I'm not saying it's a guarantee.
But it'll help.
But you learn a lot about writing,
how stuff is
by reading, and especially if you read a book and it really speaks to you.
Yeah.
And you love it. All right, let's say I have written a young adult novel, or what I think is a young adult novel. I better go read some young adult novels and see...
Like Percy Jackson.
Yeah, there we go.
Or
because
Hunger Games.
What if it turns out what I have actually written is kind of a Tom Sawyer wannabe, and kids don't really read that stuff anymore.
Not anymore, unless they have to for class.
Which is, I'm not saying that's a good or bad thing. I just think you need to read what you love. this is a topic just for fun.
Mm-hmm.
What Jake and I have both discovered is that sometimes when you're writing, you've got a character, and hopefully your characters are real to you. They have actual personalities, and you feel like they're friends of yours, and you know them well enough, you think, to know what they're going to do in a given situation. However, Jake and I have both had the experience where you're trying to write a character into a scene, trying to get them to do something, and they start to fight you. And
you might be like, what?
Fight you.
What are you talking about?
What are you, crazy, Chris?
Yeah.
But you'll know it when the scene won't get written. It'll just be so hard, you'll feel like you've come to a screeching halt, and you're like, nothing you write will feel right. It'll all just be like, no, that's bad. Try something else. No, that's bad. And you might realize after a moment, your characters are fighting you.
I had a book where I have a main character. Main character is a 14-year-old girl who meets another girl who's about the same age. I wrote, one girl's called Melfina, the other character's called Dakota. I wanted Dakota to basically be the villain / antagonist of the book. I wanted Dakota to be like Mel's opposite. But the two characters really bonded like crazy. They became sisters in a way that I was not expecting at all. So when the time came for Dakota's big villain reveal to come out, literally, like, it was almost like my character said, I don't want to do that. I don't want to betray.
She actually came out and said,
character. Yeah.
I won't do
I'm
that.
not going to do this to my sister. And when I tried to force Dakota to act like a villain, it felt wrong. It really did. And so I was like, oh, okay, you're not the villain. You want to actually help this girl. There was still a conflict, but instead now the emotions were a lot more sincere. They made a lot more sense, you know, and it was quite touching, actually.
Right, and it turned out to be a really sweet relationship in the book.
And then I was able to be like, well, I would like a villain still, and I was able to bring in another guy.
As I recall, though, Dakota and Mel still had a disagreement. I mean, just because they're friends and like sisters doesn't mean they can't disagree with each other.
But all I'm saying is, my character's surprised.
But Dakota refused to like stab Melfina in the back.
Yeah.
I think you should always listen to your characters.
I have another example.
I have one too. Okay, here's another example. But I'm going to take you back to my Boss books. In the Boss books, Carol Frank, the secretary, is dating Gus Haglund, the cop. And you'll have to read the books to find out how that came about.
Uh-oh.
Gus Haglund and Carol are like, they're dating. And we come to book 3.
Wow.
And I have Carol going undercover for Gus. He wants her to investigate something for him.
Okay.
And she says, okay, I'd be happy to do that because she's a big fan of mysteries. And so she's thrilled to do that. And as the book progressed, Gus became very obstinate. He's like, hold on a minute. There is no way I would ever put Carol in danger.
Whoa. Okay.
I wouldn't do it. And I'm like, Gus, this is the plot of the book. And he's like, no, sorry, I'm not agreeing with this. And so I had to make a pretty big change in the story.
Wow.
If you're writing a romance, it helps to be a little in love with your own character.
Sure.
And Gus is, he's very dreamy.
So you had to make a change.
I had to make changes because Gus said I would never do that to someone I cared about.
Were you okay with the change?
Oh my God, the change is fabulous. I
cool.
loved it.
All right, well, you don't have to get into the specifics.
I will not get into the specifics, but I was very happy with it.
This is a great example. If you didn't feel right about the book.
Oh, I was okay with it, but I hadn't gotten very far before Gus let me know he was not okay with it.
So you need to realize that you're going to have to get rid of a lot of stuff. Even if you're like, oh no, I love these pages. Hell, I love these chapters. You might end up having to rewrite.
Yeah, that hurts too.
It hurts.
It hurts to have to clip stuff.
But then you kind of realize, hey, maybe I need to do that. Hey, here's a good example of that.
Oh,
please go on.
Well, no, go ahead. Say your example.
My very first novel, again, I'll keep this short. My very first novel I ever really finished was about two police officers. Basically, it was paced like this. Mission, meeting, like debrief.
Debrief, okay.
Mission, meeting, debrief. Or brief. Hell, both. Both a brief and a debrief.
Were the briefs not feeling very brief?
Oh my god, the briefs and the debriefs were awful. They always drugged me down. So then, draft 2 of the book. I had a lot less briefs and debriefs, but at the beginning, I had like this big meeting to set everything up. And again, I hated the meeting. So what I realized was the less briefs and debriefs, the better. Even though cop stories often involve a lot of briefs and debriefs, when I got rid of a lot of my briefs and debriefs, I realized this is flowing a lot better.
Here's a pointer. If you're ever writing something and you're having trouble getting through it, that is a very good sign that people will have trouble reading it.
Exactly. If you can't even read your own work without getting bored, you might
imagine what other people are going to feel.
Yeah, and you know what's going on. Characters sometimes refuse to cooperate because kind of deep down you know this isn't working.
Well, think about any book you've ever read where a character does something that you don't feel makes any sense. You're like, they would never do that. I think in cases like that, those are authors who have cheated a little bit.
Sure.
A lot of books get published and not all of them are great. And there's some books out there that are absolutely awful. And a lot of the times it's because your characters are doing the most idiotic thing. If you're writing something and it feels wrong while you're writing it and you are hating it while you're writing it, check and see if a character is fighting you.
This kind of almost gets into what our next topic, which is editing when you have no editor.
All right, editing when you can't afford an editor. I'm talking about the fact that some people will, for a fee, edit your novel. And when I say edit, I mean like make sure that you've used punctuation and grammar correctly. Now, I think if you read enough, this should not be a big issue.
But I think what an editor's really big job is to take out pages and pages and pages of meaningless bullcrap.
Well, it should be.
Take your giant, dictionary of a book, and they are going to take hedge trimmers to it and just start chomping. And you might be like, no, that's really important. And they'll be like, no,
now hang on a minute. We need to differentiate something here. You're talking about editors that work for publishing companies.
Well,
I'm talking about editing a book. Like, I wrote a book, now somebody needs to go through and proofread it for me.
Oh, so you're just talking about proofreaders.
I'm talking about an actual physical editor. All right, so let's make that distinction.
Okay.
I'm not talking about editors for a publishing company. That's a different thing.
Okay, you're talking just about...
We've looked at a lot of books, online books we find in the depths of the internet, as we always say, that have a lot of grammatical, spelling, and stuff, errors in them. That we say we're not a grammar and spelling show. That's fine.
Right.
However, if you want to be taken seriously, the less you have of that, the better.
So, like we said, Word docs and Google Docs can help.
It can help. We say this every episode. Having somebody read your book to you and listening to it,
oh my God,
can help
it's
a
so
lot.
Helpful. If you sit down with a friend, someone who is not scared to rip into your work and hand it to them, they'll read it out loud and they'll get tongue-tied on weird sentences. They won't be able to enunciate things. They'll be confused about things.
It helps to have a friend who is also well-read, who can stop and say, I don't think this is the word you meant to use.
Yeah.
Now, here's the thing. We all make mistakes. I have published books online on Smashwords that I have read and read and read again. And I'm like, this is ready to publish. And I publish it. And a week later, I look at it and, damn it, I find an error.
What's that one example you have of
lightning?
Deck of cards.
Lightning. Oh my God. There's lightning in the sky, Lightning, lightning. And there's lightening, which is like
Lightening up a room.
lightening up a room. Lightening. It's not the same thing. And things like that you can screw up anytime.
Well, because they're both words, and word processors weren't able to pick it up.
Right. So
Because
spell check's not going to know.
spell check isn't going to know because it's like, oh, that's a word, yeah. So
Right.
it can't be like, hey, was that the word you meant to use actually?
So what I guess what I'm saying is, if you have to edit your own stuff, be careful. I mean,
Careful,
it
yeah.
definitely helps to
Get a friend.
But
get something.
maybe I'm like, I don't
Get
want to
it out.
sound like I'm all Miss Perfect here, because I find mistakes in my stuff all the time, and I'm like, oh my God, I'll make mistakes that I'm so embarrassed, like getting it's wrong, ITS as opposed to IT apostrophe S.
Oh, I
know the difference, but I still,
They're a pain in the
once in a
butt.
blue moon.
You get people who don't know all the throughs.
So you can pay
Yeah,
people to
exactly.
edit your book. But if you can't afford it or don't want to pay for it, editing your own book often requires you to read your own book until you hate your own book so much, you're so sick of it,
Yeah.
that you're like, if I have to read this book one more
goddamn time, yeah.
and no matter how good it was, no matter how much you loved it, when that happens, I feel like it's a good idea to put a book down for a month.
Yeah.
Give yourself a break from it.
Distance yourself.
Write something else for a while.
Yeah, then you come back to it and you can look at it with fresh eyes. And you might even look at it and be like, what was I thinking?
Or you might look at it and go, oh my God, this is
really good.
pretty good.
Yeah.
And all right, so that goes into our next topic, which is writing processes.
What did you mean by writing processes?
When I said that, writing processes, we were talking about different things people do to complete a book. Like, do you do an outline first?
Oh, outlines. This might sound silly, but honestly, it really helps me out. Do you know what I'm talking about when I say the movie trailer voice? The guy who says, in a world.
In a world, yeah.
All right, so get that voice in your head, and it says, in this book, these sisters used to be rich, but then tragedy strikes. Now, these sisters are poor, and they're looking for their soulmates.
They have to find husbands.
Now, they must cry on each other's shoulders and survive day by day, and use their sense and sensibilities to... How does that book end again?
Everybody gets happily married.
Right. And then to maybe get happily married and get more money.
Oh, yes, well...
So basically what I'm saying is get summarize your whole book's plot like you were describing a movie.
All right, so that works for you.
Yes. I want to do another example of that.
All right,
just to show.
hit me with your example.
I'm going to come up with a story on the fly to help show that this can really create a story narrative in a way that actually makes sense.
Okay.
One night, a man was driving in the woods, driving alone, because he just broke up with his girlfriend. He was... Like now I'm actually thinking, like, how is this a story? How is this a conflict? Well, the girlfriend comes chasing after him. He sees her car behind him with her headlights blaring on his vehicle. It's like, hey, it's my girlfriend. Then she has a crazy look in her eyes and nearly runs him off the road. Now he's on the run. His crazy ex-girlfriend coming to kill him.
Ooh.
And he doesn't know why. And the police won't believe him. And then you can actually start thinking like,
I saw that movie, actually.
So using this and actually getting a full plot summary out, like you were advertising this to somebody, you might actually start to be like, oh yeah, it might be exciting if blah happened.
It would help writing your summary at the end if you had to try to market yourself.
And then you could discover plot points that you hadn't discovered previously, you know?
All right. Now, folks, that works for Jake.
Yeah, that works for me.
I have a different method. Now, we're not saying that this method is right or wrong, or any method is right or wrong. I think what happens is everybody has to come up with their own method.
Their own method, of course.
My method is I have got to know how my book ends before I ever start it. I come up with the ending first and I work from there, because if I don't, I will write a book that's a beginning and a middle and a middle and a middle and a middle and a middle, and it'll meander and meander, and I won't know how to. This has been a major problem for me, is ending a book. Like, no ending is ever going to make everybody happy.
But you should at least know where you're going.
But I personally have got to have an ending, or I'm not going to have a book.
And because you have your ending in mind, you can write your whole book and be able to foreshadow
I can write
events.
toward it.
Yeah,
that's how I have to do it. One thing that drives me nuts in movies, for example, is when the plot is resolved in a way that makes the first half of the movie not make sense anymore.
Right, okay.
And I feel like that is a person who did not have the ending in mind when they wrote the beginning.
Like, they had a great premise. They had an awesome, wonderful premise, and then aren't quite sure what to do with it. In that regard, I would recommend, a good example of that is to watch any anime. Great premise.
There you go.
Crappy ending.
Oh my god, it happens on a lot of TV shows where...
You want me to give a specific example of an anime? Any of them.
How about shows like that you love, this is like the best show, and it's got a great first season, and a killer second season, and a third season that's pretty good, and then a fourth season or a fifth season where suddenly everything goes off the rails, and it's like, what happened to my show?
Yeah.
That's a case of them not knowing where the show was going.
Is that a case of a Battlestar Galactica?
Oh, I don't want to talk about Battlestar Galactica.
It's all right.
I can't stand it anymore. All right. That's me.
Yeah, right.
When I was with... Back when I was with the publishing company, a lot of the women writers who were in the group that I was in talked about, are you a plotter or a pantster? Now this is interesting. A plotter, P-L-O-T-T-E-R, a plotter is somebody who outlines their book very carefully and writes it in order.
Sure.
A pantster is somebody who just writes a bunch of scenes.
Who flies off the seat of their pants.
They fly off the seat of their pants.
Okay.
This works for some people.
Yeah, sure.
Because then they write all these scenes they love, and then they go back and figure out a way to hook them all together.
But wait, hang on though.
It works for some people.
I'm sure it works for some people. I'm just letting my audience know, our audience know, if you write a plot summary and you literally have a series of events, you don't have to follow that series of events. Like we were talking about earlier, if your characters refuse to do something that happens later on, it might be because, hey, I thought of something better actually. You don't have to go with your outline if you think of something better.
Of course not. I mean,
but it just helps you out with what the hell happens.
Outline or even a plot, if you're just holding it in your head, there's never something that says you can't go back and change everything if you want to. It's your story.
There's a great YouTube series. It's called. It's funny. It's called Terrible Writing Advice, but it's sarcastic. It's like saying, I'm going to let you know what to do, and you're actually supposed to do kind of the opposite of what he does.
Okay.
It's a funny series, and he talks about slideshow plots where you've written your outline, and it's like characters in forest, characters then in dwarf city, then characters in volcano, and then so it seems like a slideshow plot where they're in a forest, then boom, suddenly they're in a dwarf city, and then boom, suddenly they're on a volcano. And so,
well, then that's a simple solution. All you do is between each one of those you put, and then they walked to a dwarf city. And then after that you put, and then they walked to a volcano.
You're exactly
Problem
right.
solved.
Problem solved. You and I are geniuses.
I just won the internet. Yeah, that's our wonderful advice on writing processes is figure it out yourself.
Here's one more good one. You know how I said earlier, find a friend, find somebody, and like literally start to tell them about your book plot. If you get into it like, all right, so this book is about main character. The main character is this job and does this thing, but then all of a sudden this happens, and all this stuff's going on. You might start to realize, oh crud, I don't know where I'm going with this story.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, sharing it with a friend.
Your friend might be like, what? wait, who's in this book? Who is the main character? And you might be like, I don't know.
Well, talking to a friend is nice. Sometimes it's awful, like somebody comes up to you and they say, I have this book I want to write. Here's what it's about. It's almost like someone saying, I had this weird dream last night.
Exactly.
Here's what it was about.
Yeah,
and you're like, oh my God, look at that. I have explosive diarrhea. I have to go.
Well, see, the benefit of, like the negative connotation about explaining a dream you had is all you basically want out of your audience is, isn't that weird? But if you're explaining to them the plot of your book, you're actually saying like, hey man, does this sound interesting? And your friend could be like, no, it doesn't sound interesting.
Which is an interesting point because our next topic is writers groups.
Look at this. This is like the king. Look at our segues. Man.
We are winning the internet again.
Again, on a segue.
Underground Book Club will be back after this important message. Hi, Mort Hambone here at the Salad and Paladin, where I'm like, wow, look at my best friend Penny's commercial. She's single, guys, but she promises she's too good for you. But come on down anyway to the Salad and Paladin because we're proud to be part of Pennett's Castle's Summer Fertility Festival. Mention this commercial and get 20% off a salad packed full of all the vitamins you need to participate in the pagan ritual of your choice with as many creatures as you like because we don't make judgments here, Dad! We're conveniently located near the Cave of the Infinite Staircase and Mount Madness. Well, let me tell you, there's a fertility ritual you gotta carve up for. Anyway, try the Salad and Paladin. We'll put some salad in you. We now return to Underground Book Club. Joining a writer's group.
Right. Okay, so I have been in a writer's group. I will say I only went to the writer's group like I'd say a half a dozen times.
I don't think you were in a very good writer's group.
Yeah.
From what I heard, it wasn't a great writer's group.
It wasn't great. They did help me out a lot, but overall it wasn't a great experience.
That's interesting. How can you say they helped you out a lot, but it wasn't a great experience?
I will. That's a great
Please
story.
explain.
But before I go, you were at the time because you were also in a writer's group, right?
My story is a bit different because what I did was I took a lot of creative writing in college.
Right.
And so the classes were sort of treated like a writer's group.
Okay.
The teacher had people submit things, everybody read it, and then you discuss. What was really good about that format is the teacher the professor acted as a monitor, and she kept everything focused. She didn't let things get nasty,
okay,
which
nice.
can happen if you're, she made sure everybody stayed on topic. She kept the time limits
down.
Correct.
Yeah.
And she knew enough about writing to make some very good points. I learned a lot in that class, both about what's good about writers' groups and what's bad about them.
Sure.
And I don't know if you're ever going to find a perfect one.
Oh, I read about this in How to Write a Damn Good Novel by James N. Frey. Hey, it's all coming back together. He describes 3 different types of writers' groups you'll find. The first type are praisers. You give your writing to everybody. Let's say you wrote a poem and you show everybody, and they're gonna love it no matter what because they want to elevate you. They're like, this is awesome.
You wrote a poem.
I love the colors. Oh my gosh, and the butterfly. That's so genius. I love your characters. Oh my gosh, this is gonna get turned into a movie ASAP.
So they're super supportive.
And you might feel great afterward, but that's not gonna help your writing a whole lot because you could have shown them any damn thing and they would have loved it. The second group are the snobs. This writing group are the people who only read things by Chekhov. They are into the classics. And these guys, they read Ayn Rand specifically. And anything you submit they will compare your work to the masters specifically.
Oh, so they'd be highly demanding, like,
oh my god, crazy.
They would not be willing to work with fledgling writers.
Exactly.
All right, so that's 2 kinds of writers groups.
But now there's the third, and these are the helpful critics. the helpful critics who will read your book and basically kind of like what you should do. They'll compliment you on what you do good, but they will tear it down when you need be so that you can improve it. They'll take your book and chop it into bits. They'll criticize everything they can think to criticize because they will help you think of even better ways of explaining how to work with your book.
Yes, that's the idea, I think.
Yeah.
What I'd worry about and why it helps to have a monitor like the professor is that it's fun to criticize things.
Sure.
It's way easier to criticize something than to praise it.
You're going to sit there, and if you get too much criticism thrown on you, you might sort of think, "Oh God, I'm terrible at this," and then you might stop writing.
I mean, if you need to like have a way of saying, is this criticism helping anything?
Exactly. So rather, perhaps as if you are critiquing someone's work, rather than saying, "Hey, this sucks. Why is this even in here?" You should be like, I see where you're going with this. Let's try and find an even better way.
Well, and I don't know that you even have to say, I see where you're going with this, but
what are you getting
as a critic, if you're criticizing something and you just say, look, it's just awful. It's just awful. That tells nobody anything.
Right.
It helps very much to be able to pinpoint something specific, say where it's not working for you,
yeah,
and maybe why. And sometimes you don't.
Well, and because you're in a writer's group, it's a lot of people, and the other people, you can actually have a discussion on why it doesn't
Hopefully
work.
so.
Hopefully everyone doesn't just gang up on you.
That can
happen.
This is why a monitor is a good thing.
Yeah, having it's sort of like people arguing in a courtroom. You got to have the judge to bang on the gavel and be like, "Hey,
and say,
order,
stop!
order."
Wait a minute. Writers groups are an iffy proposition.
Sure.
Now, see, I'm not a social person. I'm actually kind of an introvert, and I don't like the thought of getting into a group of people.
But I love it.
But you love it. All right.
Love it.
And so I liked it in a classroom situation because the professor was in control.
Yes,
and
exactly. Like a judge.
She made some very good points. When people would get defensive, she would defend the criticism. When people were unfairly critical, she would defend the writers.
Hey,
She kept it on a basis of what helps. It's not
Sure.
just like, is this good or is this bad? It's like, how can this be better? And if one person doesn't like it, does it matter?
Sure, exactly. That's very cool. The teacher is able to contextualize all the criticism in a manner of teaching and improving.
Right.
And so that must have been pretty cool.
So the reason why I was thinking that the one that Jake went to wasn't great was because they seem to be more like...
Okay, I'll tell the story.
Interested... Okay,
all
yeah,
right.
You tell.
There's a bunch of wannabe writers, and they're all part of an email group. Someone would submit their writing via email to everyone, and everyone would read it. Then everyone would go to this restaurant, and they all would take turns, theoretically, discussing the work that they read. And the work could be anywhere from 1 page to 20 pages. 20 was like the max. I was always the guy that submitted 20 pages, by the way. Theoretically, they would meet up in this bar or / restaurant, have some food, and talk about the writing. In theory. Here's what actually happened. Yes, through email, the work was submitted. Everyone finally arrives at this damn restaurant at like 9 p.m.
So people would be late, or they'd arrive whenever they felt like it.
Oh my God, it was awful. And like they met at like 9 or so.
And
finally.
It sounded to me like a lot of people wouldn't even read the material till they got there.
One guy would have like a copy of the writing in their hand, and they'd be flipping through the pages really slowly, I might add. And then they would pass it around in a circle to everybody, and you're just sitting there tapping your fingers on the table.
Preparation is important.
Yeah.
Do people come prepared?
Do the reading.
If they're not preparing, then it doesn't feel like anybody cares.
Yeah, anyone cares. All right, so then finally, once everyone stopped talking about their roommates and drunk stories and stopped talking about, whatever the hell, and basically it was just a bunch of hipsters meeting up to talk about work stuff. finally you'd actually get people to talk about the writing at about 10 o'clock p.m.
Okay.
And like say I presented it, I'm like, hey, how did everyone think about it? And it was like 4 people there, and one of the guys, he's a teacher and he was the leader, and he was like, he would genuinely let you know what the hell. And like he would give you all these thoughts on the book. Like he would say stuff like, cut the first chapter out. And that's very blunt. It's like, wow, the whole first chapter. But really, he just means it starts a little slow. Then like there was another person who got it, who was like a grammar Nazi. There was another guy who had a lot of questions about the world, and he wanted to know all the stuff about the world. And like, what happens later on in the book? What happens later on in the book? And I'm just like, well, goddamn, it's like the first 20 pages. This isn't the whole novel. I'm going to get into that later on.
Yeah.
All right? I'm not going to, like, you know, one of the people in the writers' groups would say, hey, you shouldn't have so much exposition at the beginning. But then later on, someone else in the writers' group would say, you need to explain more in the beginning of what's going on here. And so it would be some conflicting things. There was no coach. There was no mediator. There was just chaos.
That does sound pretty chaotic.
Everyone was half drunk. Some people wouldn't even do the reading. It was all very half-assed. And just, like the leader guy, he would submit like 6 or so pages of a draft that he wrote like drunk, tired the night before. And he gives it to everyone, and like we start to criticize him, and he's like, yeah, I know about these problems. I wrote it really quickly. I'm probably not even going to include it in the draft. And I'm like, oh my god, if you're not even going to include this shit in the draft, why are we reading it? Why are you wasting our time? Wasting our time? We only do this once a damn week. Why are we wasting our time?
I think that business of, this is just crap I wrote real quick last night, I'm not serious, I think that's a defense mechanism that gives you an excuse to say, well, if you don't like it, it's just because it's crap I just wrote last night real quick. And
oh my god.
I think with a writer's group, it's important that the writers and the the writers and the critics are both, they have a responsibility to each other.
Yeah.
You know, everybody, don't waste each other's time. I think if you can find a group that's mature enough that everybody understands not to waste each other's time,
sure,
that's great.
Perfect.
And a classroom situation is very good for that.
Here's what I would do. If I were running a writer's group, here's what I would do. First off, I'd try to find a way to have it be like, you know, not any time other than Monday at 9 o'clock. But then again, it's hard to schedule everyone together.
Right. Getting people together is hard. Anymore, like with FaceTime and Skype and stuff.
Yeah, you can do this online.
I think doing an online group would be much easier.
Yeah.
You could
schedule everyone, easy peasy.
You know, nobody has to go meet any place, and you don't have to pay for drinks and stuff.
Yeah.
As a critic in a writer's group, here's a couple things to remember. Complimenting someone else, finding somebody else's work very good, promising, is never diminishing to yourself. If you're the type of person who feels like you're insecure enough about your own stuff that you feel you have to criticize everybody else's.
Oh. Are you saying don't put other people down because...
Don't put other people down just for the sake of it.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And if you have it in your head that you are putting somebody down, that's a problem there.
Sure. You're not doing it to be mean to somebody. You're trying to help them.
Elevating somebody else is never going to diminish yourself.
Okay. That's very interesting.
So just keep it in mind that if you're reading somebody's stuff and you have a criticism to make, please ask yourself, is this helpful? Am I saying something that matters?
Yeah.
If I'm saying, well, I don't like this character,
that's
not helpful at all.
That is subjective.
That is completely subjective.
Well,
and it's not.
Then again, you could think any kind of criticism is subjective. But
that's a slippery slope.
Okay,
I know.
How about more so like, I don't like your character just because personally I don't like them.
I don't like women named Karen.
That's pretty out there.
Okay,
like, come on.
That's not helpful.
This guy when I showed him my little fan fiction, Inferno, you know, he was like, "Who names their kid Judge? Who names their kid Brentley?" I'm just like, "Are you serious? Get off the names."
That's not helpful.
That's not helpful.
That's not helpful. Okay, so if you're reading somebody's stuff and you don't like it. You don't. Why? Okay, because I can't see your people. I can't see your characters. I don't know where they're standing. I don't know what room they're in. I don't know why they're talking to each other.
This is what a mediator, like an arbitrator, comes in. Well, the arbitrator could be like, "All right, Billy. Now, what is this criticism?" Let me think if the writers group really gave me a great suggestion. I know. I had vampires, and the vampires had they were writing using Latin, and my writers group asked a very logical question: why are they writing in Latin? And I didn't have a good answer for them. I was just like, Latin.
So, because Latin seems cool.
Latin sounds cool, and they're just like, you know, they come from Transylvania. Maybe you should think of like what language originates from there and why they use the language, rather than just writing Latin just because it sounds cool. And I'm like, yeah.
Okay, if you give people something and just say like, here's my first 6 pages of my book, just read it and then tell me what you think. You're gonna get like, however many people are in the group, you're gonna get that many different opinions. All right?
Yeah.
I feel like a more helpful thing would be like, if you have a writer's group, submit your stuff and pose your own questions about it.
Yeah.
Like, here's my first 6 pages. Do you
feel like you would want to keep reading?
Do you want to keep reading? All right. Well, that's maybe a yes or no.
If you flip through these first 6 pages in a book you rented from the library, would you actually want to keep
reading? That's a very basic question. How about I'm trying to convey a real sense of fear. Do I manage it?
What am I evoking correctly?
Yeah.
Do you know what's going on?
Yeah. Can you tell where these people are?
With some of the books we've read, I wouldn't be able to answer some of those questions.
Well, that's true. So if you're in a writer's group, maybe think about what do you want out of it.
Hey, guys, I'm trying to write this in third person present tense. Am I doing that
Is
all right?
the tense working for you?
Working? Yeah, exactly.
Third
person present is kind of hard.
Your group was having these things where people would say like, okay, well, I just wrote this down last night. It's like 3 pages of baloney. What do you think? How is that supposed to get anything accomplished? When I have a manuscript and I give it to my readers, I have 3 readers that I use.
Including me.
Including Jake.
Yeah.
3 readers that I rely on. And I ask questions when they're done. I say, did anything happen that didn't make sense? I say, did anything not happen that you wanted to happen?
Does it seem disappointing?
Are you disappointed?
Did you know what happened?
Do you understand every scene?
Yeah.
There's a time when people are standing here saying this stuff. Is it clear what's going on?
What is this book about?
I try to be specific. It's hard. Everybody that I use for a different reason. And
right.
For example, when I give a book to Bruce, he's not a great critic. He will never be the one to say, I found your imagery to be insufficient. I couldn't see. Sorry, but here's what he will do.
He's the kind of guy where he only has specific answers for specific questions.
Yeah, you have to be specific with him, but here's what he will do. If I ever write something that is not logical, he will let me know.
Yeah.
And he has saved my butt on at least 2 occasions.
Right.
When he has said, this is not working, you've got to change this.
Or if you get into a corner, you're like, I don't know where to go with this.
And he can get you out of a corner. So, I mean, even though he's not able, or he's not the type of person who can say, My God, your woodland scenery it made me feel like I was in a primordial forest. He'd never say that.
You did something really neat. You had a book where a bunch of characters were basically trapped in a manor in the middle of the woods, and you wanted to make sure that the characters were doing logical things.
Yes.
And you wanted to make sure that you didn't want your characters to be stupid. It's
right.
like, can they call for help? Well, there's no phone signal. Can they turn on a phone signal? No, it's all being jammed. Can they get a car and drive away? No, the car's all in a garage. And then you would say, all right, Jake, you are trapped in a manor in the middle of nowhere. What do you do?
Right, yeah, I did.
I was able to kind of think, like, oh, what would I do? I'd gather supplies, I'd get a car jack out of a car, and I'd start throwing it under doors.
I did, and you and Bruce were both very helpful when I said, what is the first thing you would try? And then what would you try after that if you...
And that didn't work. Yeah.
And how would you get out of there? So
I think that's why you included the scene with someone finding a life alert and pressing it a bunch.
Yes, I did. I exactly. And I listened to you all when you said, how you would deal with this situation. Yeah. So also, speaking from experience, don't be overly sensitive.
Oh yeah, don't be sensitive.
Because
this shouldn't get personal.
As soon as it starts to get personal, like it's about you instead of about the book, you're not in a good place there.
Here's another idea for that specifically. This is an idea from James M. Frey or whatever his name was. He says, print out like 20 pages or so and pretend like you didn't even write it. Pretend like someone else wrote it and like you're doing this for a favor for someone else.
Oh wow!
Like say this other person wrote it. Like I need to criticize it. Help me figure out what's wrong with it, and then they can tear into it, and it won't be a shred personal. You might be like, oh my god, but still, they aren't going to be yelling at you. They'll be yelling at this imaginary other person.
I guess that's one way to go about it. It doesn't feel to me like, oh wow, that seems to me like keeping everything fairly dishonest and
You keep knocking down all my ideas.
All right, that's fair, and maybe what it means is that what works for one person doesn't always work for everybody. The class I was in, woman wrote a children's story about a squirrel, and I thought it was absolutely adorable. It was just a hoot. I said to her, oh my God, this story was so cute. And she was like, oh. And I'm like, what? And she goes, cute, huh? And she said, I think, cute. And I said, yeah, it was really cute. All right, so my definition of cute and hers were different.
Wow.
And so I had to sort of say to her, I'm complimenting you. I thought it was, what is a better word? I thought
Adorable,
it was precious. I loved it. I thought it was so sweet. And she's like, oh, well, I always thought the word cute meant kind of like, I don't know, like, well, we said a while ago, trite.
Oh,
and
wow.
I say something that I think kind of bugs you, like when I say a movie was fun. I know you don't like that because you're like, what does that even mean?
Yeah, right.
Well, what I mean by that was that while I was watching it, I was really enjoying myself.
I had an entertaining experience.
What is our point here? Everybody has different definitions in their head of what a word means.
Okay, yeah, so just be careful about that.
So, Jill, if you try to say something to somebody and they don't seem to be responding, I don't know, maybe try different words. Like with her, I was like, well, I mean cute as a very good thing. Okay. I love your squirrel. It's damn semantics, I'm telling you. It's just speaking from a writer's group perspective, though, a communication maybe would be the most important thing. The fact that she and I could have a discussion about how I felt cute, what I thought it implied and what she thought it implied, I mean, that eventually led us to an understanding. And I liked her story.
So today's prompt will be, what do you think cute means? No, I'm kidding.
What is the most useless piece of writing advice you've ever been given?
There we go. That's perfect.
What is most useless? That's hyperbole. What is a useless piece of writing advice?
Okay, all right.
Mine, for example, would be redheads don't wear red. I wrote a short story. I wrote a short story about. It was basically a spin-off on Little Red Riding Hood. She's got her red cape on. She's got bright red hair.
Redhead.
She's walking down the street. I wrote this whole story, and this one kid had to say was, redheads don't wear red.
Wow.
I was a redhead at the time, sitting there in a bright red sweater, looking at him like, what?
Well, mine I already said. Mine was, who names their kid Brentley?
All right, so please, in the prompts, write, what is a useless piece of writing advice you've gotten?
Yes, that's good. I like that prompt.
Okay.
Next time we'll be talking about dogs.
Are we really going to be talking about dogs?
Yeah.